Melee fighting games are all over the place now, but you know what's missing? A good old-fashioned punching, kicking, screaming and gouging people in the eyes kind of game. No really, where are they? Where'd they go? Apart from Fight Night, the one on the background, I don't know of many of them on the way. In the hope that there will be some more on the way, this is the top 7 best punching and kicking games, or top 7 best hand-to-hand combat games that aren't in an arena. Not the kind of, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Tekken kind of games. Those you'd expect to have good combat in them because they don't have anything else. There's just two people in an arena punching each other. It gets boring. You can't fight 4-on-1. You can't use a lamppost to redecorate someone's face. Long term, I mean. I know you can pick up things in the last couple of NetherRealms fighting games to bash people over the head with. But you get the idea, right? The kind of succession of the idea of the brawler, of the beat-em-up. The kind of games now relegated to being budget releases by Activision in the form of kind of underwhelming Legend of Korra games or downright dreadful Ninja Turtles games. Honestly, the one they made before the last one, people said it was horrible. It wasn't as bad as the last one. That being said, and with the mention that it may have been a couple of years since I played some of these, let's begin with number 7, Overgrowth. Now I know what you're gonna say. You said the combat in this game was horrible. No, I didn't. What I said was that the combat in that game was about as easy as keeping click pressed and then killing the enemy. It gets a bit harder later on with you having to actually block and stuff, but the reason I'm putting this game here on number 7 is because of how the combat feels. When you punch something, when you kick something, you feel it. The physical reaction is superb. And yes, even though you can absolutely cheese it by just jumping on everybody's head, which will not be completely instant kill every time, though most times it will, there's a sort of kinetic energy to it, a sort of feedback, both visual, auditive, and visceral, that still kind of drives you towards it. Also, the fact that you can absolutely break your character's neck by botching an attack or botching a jump or a tumble in the air makes it even more pleasant because it's not cheating. The physics in it try to be authentic. They try to make things fair. Yeah, you can pick up weapons, but you can also throw them at people and they'll grab them from the air sometimes even, and they'll be momentarily distracted and you can punch them in the face real hard with a foot, also known as kicking. Still, would not have heard if the game actually had proper detail control. Number 6, Zeno Clash. Zeno Clash really stood out when it came out because it had kind of nice melee combat compared to what other kind of melee combat we've had in games, for example, player known as Battlegrounds, or compared to The Calling. This one actually has good combat. Sure, those were multiplayer games and suck in many aspects, but the fact that you had this kind of game, which was essentially a brawler because you went through a story and fought people and places. Yeah, you had weapons, but you mostly punched and kicked people really hard. And it was satisfying. It would have been more satisfying if it wasn't constantly being locked on to the enemies and you had a bit more freedom, and if punching someone in a certain place would actually have more of a reaction and not be completely contextual, and the ability to jump and attack would have been nice, but it's still a tiny bit better than what Mirror's Edge had in terms of combat, though to be fair, that was a parkour game and not a combat game. Number 5, The Matrix Path of Neo. Now, I know that Enter the Matrix was absolute garbage, but Path of Neo was actually kind of okay in terms of combat. The first level, the tutorial, is a place where you get to fight a whole bunch of enemies, and depending on how well you do, the game is set to a certain difficulty level. The animations are nice, and you get the sense of punching people, the sense of kicking people, the sense of windmilling a couple of Agent Smiths as a weapon. Now, to be fair, it has been a couple of years since I last played this game, quite a few years, so my memory may not be 100% accurate in regards to how good the combat was, but I remember it being good enough, enjoyable, pleasant, fun. The downside is that the game doesn't have as much of the combat as I would have wanted to because it is the Path of Neo. It starts after the tutorial with Neo in an office, not kicking people in the face. It then continues with Neo in the simulation The Matrix where he's a ninja and still not kicking people in the face. He does boring stuff like trying to escape a burning building. Wow, that's exactly what I wanted in this game about punching people in the face. Also, there's There's a bit of a disconnection from the movie series at the end on account of they didn't want to end the game with, him dying tragically. And you just have a pop-up of the developer saying, hey, we know the movie didn't end like this, but instead of getting absorbed by Agent Smith, how about you get to fight a giant Agent Smith that's made of smaller Agent Smiths? Or was it garbage? I don't know, something like that. Still, it was a good enough game as I remember it being. Not sure if it actually was though. Should have probably checked. I didn't. But it was fun back then. Number 4, Bosch. If you're not familiar with this game, how shall I put this to you? You know games like Quap and all those joke games where you have to move the limbs of a character and hopefully do some simple action like walking in a straight line? Yeah. Bosch was kind of that, but with fighting, and you got to control every joint, every muscle, not exactly every muscle, but a lot of muscles and joints and limbs of a character. If you will, it was a sort of almost turn-based kind of affair where you would move one limb and see how it acted, move one more, add some impulse in one direction, see what happened then, and your objective was to beat up some people or do stuff. It was kind of sandbox in nature in the sense that you basically got to play around with some dolls. But in terms of melee combat, it was impactful. Like you could feel everything because it usually took you about an hour to throw a punch. At first, I mean, later on you would do all sorts of complicated maneuvers involving punching, kicking, screaming, grabbing people by the head, doing pretty much anything that your imagination could conceive. And I do believe it did have multiplayer, though do not quote me on that because it has been 10 years since I played it maybe. Was it even out back then? Who knows? That remains a mystery. Number 3, X-Men Origins Wolverine. Now I am cheating a bit because in this game you do have weapons, the Wolverine claws, but they are attached to his hands, so he can't actually do much about it. I'm gonna classify this as a fighting game in the sense of punching, kicking, screaming, and shoving claws in someone's face. It amazed me how good this game was, how good the combat was. I was used to playing games at that time that had really crappy combat, where if an enemy started an animation, you could not interrupt that animation. He would do that animation for years on end until it was over and you'd be somewhere in a corner, bored or dead. But in X-Men Origins Wolverine, if an enemy leapt at you to do a big fancy attack, you could jump at him, pluck him from the air, slam into the ground, and then dance on his pretty little face. That single solitary moment, the fact that I can do that was amazing. That and the fact that the rest of the combat system was quite well made, from what I remember, pretty much put this game for the longest amount of time at the top of the list in terms of superhero games. It kind of still is. Also, really good melee combat game. And by melee, I mean mostly hand-to-hand, because you're Wolverine. Why would you need a gun or a sword? The boss battles, though, were horrible. You just had the same fight where you have to dodge the enemy, let him slam into a wall, and then attack him. It was that fight about 5 times. Sort of like what Arkham Asylum had with the Bane fight. It was the same thing. It was boring as hell in terms of boss battles, but the rest was actually good. Number 2, God Hand. Back before Platinum Games was Platinum Games, there were Clover Studios and they made a couple of games that were quite interesting. One of them was God Hand. It was basically the most ludicrous punching, kicking game you could probably imagine. You would control a character that has, well, a god hand. It's not his. It's sort of melded to him. And there's this crazy lady trying to chop it off. And then there's these crazy people in general trying to... I'm not sure if they're trying to actively kill you or if you're just really pissed off at them and trying to kill them. But they're everywhere. They're weird. And the game excels at being weird. The Japanese kind of weird. The good kind of weird. Where you can punch people into space, decapitate them with an attack. You had a lot of attacks that you could unlock that gave you all sorts of kooky, strange, and bizarre kind of abilities. You had one ability called Head Slicer. What's not to love about that? Also, the game had a quite high difficulty level in the sense that pretty much everybody could kill you, and I wasn't too crazy about the way the camera worked, and the fact that it did have quite a lot of cuties in it where you would mash a button, but at least they were kinetic, like they were focused on what you did on the screen. For example, if the game told you to mash a button now, every time you mash that button you would see a kick flying through the air and you could do like a bajillion kicks in a minute. It was the, hey, if we're gonna implement a QuickTime event and have the player not actually play, at least let's give him something good to watch. If only someone remastered it and launched it on multiple platforms. It's a spectacle fighter that did for hand-to-hand combat what pretty much every other Platinum Games title did for every other kind of combat, or what Devil May Cry did for spectacle fighters. Probably the only reason why I'm not putting it at the top of my list is because I really didn't have the chance to play it all that much on account of it being a PlayStation 2 game and me not having access to a console at all, unless it was an NES clone called the Terminator. And number 1 is Oni. What else could I have put here? I've made no attempts to hide the fact that I love this game, and I love it because it is simplistic in the way the combat is implemented. Left click punch, right click kick, space for jumping, shift for crouching, WASD for movement, and that's all. But from that you get a phenomenal combat experience where every punch feels good, every combination attack feels fantastic, where you get to fight 4, 5, 6 people at a time. You get to run around them and just grab one guy by the throat and use him as a pole to swing around and kick everybody else in the face and then snap his head off. Well, it didn't snap off, but you could sort of hear the where it sort of indicated that he is not going to be having fun times anytime soon. The level design was kind of horrible, and you couldn't really pick up crates to bash people over the head with them, but it felt so good. You had grapples, you had throws, you had disarm movements, you had stun movements, you had so much variety in a system that was yet so simplistic that you could understand it so easily. It's an absolute shame that the launch version did not come with the multiplayer, though I believe it is playable right now in multiplayer thanks to the community, because it has a really active community that still supports the game, adds content to it constantly, and I mentioned that you could still change your character anytime in the game and play as any other entity within Oni, not just Kanoko. And they did try to make a sequel at one time and it didn't pan out. And by them I mean not Bungie, someone else did. If there ever was a game that I wished would get a sequel or at least a re-release with all the bells and whistles that weren't in the original, it would be this. And God Hand 2. And that would be the top 7 games where punching and kicking feels really good, but it's not a fighter game and not really Double Dragon because those were kind of 2D, and it's more 3D and a bit more nuanced than just a linear succession of 2D, you know what I mean. I'd like to give a special mention to Gang Beasts. No, really, it's probably one of the best wrestling games we have currently, and if I missed one, please let me know in the comments. And if you're gonna say, well, of course you missed Batman Arkham Asylum, well, if you think that's a good combat system, you're the reason why games are bad today. Go to your corner and feel ashamed. Goodbye.